All right, so I wanted to cover Nexus Dashboard Insights. As you can kind of see here on my screen, I'm using a dcloud environment. When I log in, I see one view. And so one view is when you are able to basically see multiple Nexus dashboards with different services running on them from a single consolidated view, which is what we're seeing here. So if I click the drop down on services, we can see that, Orchestrator is running for a particular site and Insights is running for a particular site and so on and so forth. Looks like we've also got some third-party integration here with ServiceNow. Again, this is like the consolidated view of all the different data centers and what they're running. So in order to go to the typical menu system that you're used to for Nexus Dashboard, and which I showed in the Nexus Dashboard UI demo video, you just click here on Admin Console. So this is the normal view that you would see. So under Services, in some of the previous videos, there were some flyouts here for things like NDFC or Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. If there's not, you can always just click on Services anyway, see a list of installed services, and over here we've got Nexus Dashboard Insights. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. And this is the Nexus Dashboard Insights user interface. So one of the first things that comes up, as you can see here, site groups loading. And obviously this is already, an existing configuration that has site groups configured, but if it wasn't, then it should pop up with basically a setup screen that would allow you to configure your site groups. In other words, Nexus Dashboard Insights collects telemetry data from one or multiple sites, and you have to point at those sites so it can collect the data. Now, if you click up here on the Settings menu and you click on Site Groups, you've got Manage. So that's basically after site groups already exist, after you've done that initial setup. You can also click on Application and then Setup, and that would take you to that basic startup screen. So while we're in this menu, we'll go ahead and cover it. This is one of kind of the maybe not so obvious areas of various configuration within the system. So if you click on Application Status, that's going to show you basically the status of Nexus Dashboard Insights itself. So we can see down here Nexus Dashboard Software, Nexus Dashboard Operational, Nexus Dashboard Hardware. I believe this is all the telemetry data that it's basically collecting. And we have no active alerts or anything in terms of the system itself. Now, if we click on About, what you're going to see is the version of Nexus Dashboard Insights, the application itself, versus if you clicked on Help About up here in the top bar. This is the Nexus Dashboard Platform version, which we can see here as 2.12b. So in the blue bar here under Insights, the About is going to be about the application Insights. Import and export configuration is exactly what it sounds like. In terms of download offline script, this is basically a Python script that you can run against one of your sites, one of your fabrics, and then you can upload that data manually to Nexus Dashboard Insights for analysis. So that's what this is for. And let's see, we covered site groups management and then integrations. This is where you would manage integrations for things like App Dynamics, or vCenter, or Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. We'll talk a little bit more about those a little later on. So anyway, be aware of this setup menu here. There's kind of some hidden configuration in here that isn't, like I said, isn't obvious. In terms of bookmarks, basically any dashboard that you view in the system, you can bookmark into a list for later viewing. You can then trash that bookmark if you no longer want it. When you're on a particular dashboard and you want to bookmark it, you can click that bookmark symbol and it should turn orange. Here you've got some basic notifications. So we can see the latest release of Apex software has been released, so kind of helps you keep up to date on what's going on for the different fabric types that you're managing or collecting telemetry from through Insights. And then here you have a central dashboard. So the central dashboard is sort of looking at all of the different sites that Nexus Dashboard Insights is looking at. So you can kind of get an idea of, here it says site groups. by anomaly score or site groups by advisories. So we'll talk about anomalies and advisories, but we've got 4 total site groups, and then what are the different types of anomalies and their criticality rating basically here. So central dashboard is exactly what it sounds like. It's a place where you can see the different site groups that you're managing. Here you can see that we've got 4: SJC, LOM, RTP, VXLAN Fabric, and RTP. So anyway, that's the central dashboard. Be aware of that. Up here under the this is your login. So again, I'm using vCloud. That's why it says demo user, but you can click on user preferences and set your time zone, stuff like that. Here under help, if you click on the help center, then you'll be taken to an online website where you can download documentation for Nexus Dashboard Insights. Probably the most useful for operations folks is going to be the user guide. And then feedback, you can click that and you can provide feedback directly to the business unit that basically develops Nexus Dashboard. So if you want to give them feedback on the dashboard platform or on Insights, the application, you can do that both there. Okay, so one major concept, the most major concept that we've kind of already hinted about was site groups, right? So if we click on site groups management or application setup, and we're just setting up Nexus Dashboard Insights for the first time, we have to set up our site groups. So we have to keep in mind that we want to collect telemetry from multiple sites. And so a site group is really just a bucket or a logical grouping that can contain a single site or multiple sites. And the reason that that's useful is because when you configure a site group, there's certain settings that apply at a group level. And so instead of having to configure every single site individually, you can just configure those settings at a site group level. So up here, you have a site group selector, and this determines what you're going to see here in the work pane. So right now we're looking at the London site, but if we click on this, it'll bring up a list of the different site groups that we've created. And you can select one here and click on select, and it'll change the view of what you're seeing in the dashboard. Right next to that, and this is also not very obvious and kind of a hidden place of configuration, is this triple dots or this ellipsis, right? And if you click on this, there's an add menu here for compliance requirements and alert rules. You can add these things here. You can also do that right here under configure site group, along with a whole bunch of other settings. So frankly, they put that in here. Sorry about that. Just had an inbound call that wasn't expected. So you can configure compliance requirements and alert rules under configure site group. So just click on this, and then here you've got your compliance requirements and your alert rules, just like I was just saying. So these are the settings that apply at a site group level. So obviously you can edit the site group that these settings are going to apply to, and it tells us whether collection, telemetry, data collection is enabled for this particular site group, whether it's collecting configuration information, what type of site it is managing. So this is an APIC. And then also similar to that over here on the collection status page, and it does take a minute for each page to refresh, we can get an idea of which site or sites are involved in this particular site group, and then on a node by node basis, what type of data collection is occurring or compatible, right? So we're collecting information on resources, environmental data, interface statistics. This feature, flow feature, is not supported on this spine. That's probably based on a certain software level. We're not collecting endpoint information. We're not collecting events, etc. But we can see that for certain other devices we are, right? So for APIC 2, we're collecting events. For our leaf switches, we're collecting flows and endpoints, which makes sense because that's kind of our data plane for our traffic, etc. So again, this is collection status for the last hour. Down here at the bottom, we have configuration anomalies with a filter on it equals true. We could remove that and see if we see any anomalies. Yeah, we don't have any configuration anomalies. So when we talk about anomalies, we may get into configuration a bit more. So let's see, accidentally close that out. So a bug scan basically what this does is it allows you to set up a recurring bug scan. So you can see here, it'll say, state enabled, start time, frequency once a week, end on never. So this is a recurring schedule. And if you don't have a recurring schedule set up, you should be able to come in and just do an on-demand scan by clicking this button here that says scan now. And the idea here is that it provides this screen provides access to configure and schedule bug scans that run for a selected site. And what the bug scan does is it generates anomalies and alerts that are critical for the different nodes that are members of that site, or in this case, a site group. So, we're talking about fabric nodes like spines, leaves, controllers, and we're trying to understand what are the field notices, what are the advisories, what are the P-certs, etc. So this is pretty critical functionality here. Best practice would be to set up a schedule and like it's shown here, maybe run it once a week. That way, if you pick up any additional nodes or you add or remove nodes from your fabric, you're getting all of the applicable field notices, advisories, P-certs, etc. that are basically context sensitive to your fabric, right, or to your site. Under assurance analysis, this is exactly what it sounds like. Same basic idea. You can see state, start time, frequency, end on, and this provides assurance in real time. So basically, Nexus Dashboard Insights collects data, and it does so periodically. And every single time it executes that periodic data collection, it creates what's called a snapshot on the system. And that is exactly what it sounds like, right? Point in time view of the state of the network at that time. And so, assurance basically says, well, does the status of the network match the intent of the administrator? And if not, then tell us why not. So the typical example that I give here is like on an ACI fabric. If you're familiar with ACI, you know that you configure subnets under the bridge domain. And there's a checkbox there to advertise the subnet externally. And that's all fine and good. That expresses the operator's intent of advertising that network externally. But if you don't have an L3 out created, operational and bound to the bridge domain, that checkbox is never going to do anything. So the operator intent doesn't match the state of the network, right? Based on policy that's been put into the APEC. So it points out those types of problems to you, so you can proactively, ensure uptime of your network in the way it was intended. So assurance basically collects data, generates a model, and then calculates results all at the same time whenever this assurance event runs. Here you can see it's running every 15 minutes. So it can be run manually by clicking on Run Now if you don't have a recurring schedule set up. So that's basics on assurance. Now, export data enables you to export the data that's collected by Nexus Dashboard Insights over Kafka or email. So Kafka is basically like a publisher subscriber type service. Inside such a service, you have something called a topic. So basically all of that data would be published to a Kafka topic, and then whoever wanted to receive that data, whatever systems wanted to receive that data, could subscribe to that same topic. The types of things that you would export here would be things like alerts or events or usage for CPU and memory and interfaces, etc. And just like the other things, you can schedule an export or you can email. And email is good for risk and software and hardware conformance reports, maybe daily per location. So you can also get information emailed to you that includes anomalies and advisories and faults and audit logs from each of these sites. So, pretty powerful here. What's nice is if you click on email add new. Down here at the bottom, you know, you're going to see this sort of icon here where you kind of have like a hollow circle and almost like this heartbeat type symbol inside of it. But then down here you have some other circular type icons, and so you might start getting kind of confused about what the icons mean. So whenever you see this heartbeat type icon, it's referring to anomalies. Whenever you see this megaphone icon, it's referring to advisories. And whenever you see other circular type icons, it's referring to faults. And so here we can see, you know, for email, we can receive information on risk and conformance reports. But under message bus, you don't see that option. You see statistics instead. So this is where you get interface and protocol, environmental type statistics, and so on. So you configure what you need here. Export information via email or via message bus, aka Kafka. For flows, you can manage flow configuration rules on the site enabled in Nexus dashboard. So here we can basically see that we're collecting flow data. And we have 3 rules, and I'm not going to go to the configuration screen here because this is just meant to be a high-level intro. Microburst. So the idea here is that Nexus Dashboard Insights will raise anomalies based on the number of microbursts that are happening at an interface level. So there's different sensitivity levels that you can set here. You can completely disable it, or you can set high or low sensitivity. And so obviously, you know, high sensitivity is going to send out anomalies based on a fewer number of microbursts, whereas low sensitivity would send out alerts based on a higher number of microbursts. Under alert rules, what this basically does is it allows you to acknowledge any new detected anomaly that's created by the system and that matches a certain criteria, and then you can adjust the anomaly score. So the anomaly score contributes to sort of what you see on the sort of front dashboard, if you will, that helps you kind of understand, well, you know, is this site better off than that site? Is this node better off than that node? It helps you focus your attention. So, you know, you're able to match on conditions and basically control how significant that type of alert is to the overall status of the site, the node, etc. So this is where you can create those types of rules. And then under compliance reports, there's 2 types of compliance rules that you can create. When you add a compliance requirement, you can do communication or configuration. And so compliance rule that's built around communication basically is trying to determine you know, whether 2 things can communicate because they have to, whether 2 things can't communicate because they shouldn't, etc. And then configuration is, you know, trying to make sure that a certain type of configuration is always compliant. So a good example that I've seen in a Nexus Dashboard Insights demo is, you know, you configure a rule that says in ACI your VRF policy control should always be enabled. In other words, it's called enforced or unenforced setting. And what that does is it makes sure that all of the contracts that are bound to the VRF are enforced. That's the default. It's possible, right, that someone can go in and change that to disable, and then basically the customer would think that they're a lot more secure than they actually are because those contracts that have been created are no longer being enforced. So you can set up an alert here or a compliance rule that basically says, you know, the policy enforcement should always be set to enforced on a particular or a set of VRFs. And if that ever deviates, then I want to raise an anomaly because of that. You know, that would be basically a compliance violation. Okay, so those are the settings basically that you can configure under the site group. So be aware of that. That's kind of, again, a big area of configuration is here. So obviously when you click the ellipsis and you click on configure site group, it's going to show you the settings for dcloud London. So if you're looking for a different site, then you want to click this and select a different site first, and then you can configure that site group. All right, so here we are looking at the overview tab and you get an overview of alerts, and alerts, as we'll see here under this Analyze Alerts menu, consist of anomalies and advisories. So what is an anomaly? An anomaly is basically a deviation from a baseline. And so, as I mentioned earlier, right, Nexus Dashboard Insights is collecting telemetry data on a periodic basis, and every time it does, it creates a snapshot. And so the default, right, is to basically compare the current collected data to the last collected data and see if we can see any deviation of performance, environmental, interface statistics, and so on and so forth, in order to raise problems to the operator so that we can proactively go fix them. And then advisories are the things that we mentioned before, which are things like field notices and PCERT, which basically are security advisories for any of the equipment that you're managing. So you're going to see anomalies and advisories sort of repeated in the UI over and over and over again. So down here, you can see anomalies broken down by category. You can also break them down by severity. Over here, you see advisories. You can break them down via category or severity. Obviously, this is a lab, so we don't really have any advisories right now, but you get the idea. You're going to see anomalies and advisories over and over and over again inside the UI, and you can sort the information that you're seeing in the UI to help you drill down. Here, under anomaly score, we're seeing this particular site, London. We've got 2 leafs, we've got 2 spines, we've got 3 controllers, and the anomaly score on the leafs is showing critical. The anomaly score on the controllers is showing critical. The anomaly score on the spines, we have 2. It looks like maybe 1 is healthy and 1 is experiencing some major alarms. So it kind of gives you an idea of where to focus your energy. Again, dashboards are basically any of the different screens, and you can create your own dashboards, and you can bookmark dashboards. So I'm not gonna spend any time going through that because this is a demo environment. A whole bunch of random dashboards have been created. Explore is basically, it says, you can see here, it says generating a model. So it's trying to generate a logical model for this particular London fabric. And then once that model is generated, the Explore feature basically allows you to discover different assets and their object associations in an easy to consume natural language query format. So what does that mean? Well, if you're familiar with ACI, everything in ACI in the configuration UI is an object, right? And for example, maybe you create an interface policy, and then you create an interface policy group, and you bind the interface policies into a group. And then you can configure VLANs, right? And then you configure domains and AEPs, and you configure tenants and VRFs and bridge domains. All these things wind up connected to each other, logically speaking, but they represent separate objects. So there's different types of queries that you can run here. You can run a what query, which basically helps you understand how one type of object is related to or connected to another type of object in the system that you're managing, right? In this London fabric. A can query basically helps you understand whether X can talk to Y. Can X talk to Y? Yes or no? And what are the reasons for that, right? It could be policy-based. How will help you understand how X talks to Y based on policy. And view interfaces basically is a visual interface status for any leaf switch. So these are different types of queries that you can run. And just to give an example, we can maybe say can EPG web talk to EPG database, right? And so again, this is that natural language query format, right? Can source talk to destination? We said can source EPG web talk to destination EPG database, and all we had to do was click in a few menus following natural language query format. And it shows us the result. In this case, yes, those two EPGs can talk to each other. So that's just a quick example of what the Explore menu is for. I'll go ahead and close that query out. If we click on nodes, nodes basically provides various ways of viewing the behavior of the nodes based on resource. So this is things like utilization, right? So we've got resources. If we scroll down, let's see here. What am I looking for? I was looking for like CPU, RAM, and disk, but I don't actually see that. Here down at the bottom, we can see for the different nodes that are in our fabric. So here we can see our controllers, we see our leafs, we see our spines. Do we have different anomalies that have been raised? In this case, it's basically telling us that, hey, there's a new version of firmware that's available for these nodes. So, and it also tells us, whether the nodes are healthy or not. So here we can see nodes by resource utilization, by environment data that's been collected, by interface statistics, flows, endpoint information, etc. So there's different views that you have here that allow you to see the data that was collected for the different nodes in your fabric. All right, so under Analyze Alerts, we already kind of mentioned this earlier, right? But this gives you access to the total advisories, notices, p-certs, hardware, software, etc. that is applicable to your site group, which could be one or multiple different sites. So under Anomalies, anomalies consist of alerts that are raised for resource utilization, environmental issues, interface and routing protocol issues, flows, endpoints, events, compliance, change analysis, static analysis, assurance analysis, etc. Right? So there's a lot of data here. This is an area that you're probably going to spend a lot of time when you're actually using the product. So keep that in mind. This is where you can find that type of information, and then obviously you can filter. Here we can see we've got 339 anomalies, and you may want to filter. So acknowledgement equals false means these are new anomalies that the system is pointing out to you that haven't been acknowledged. So you can come over here to this menu and you can acknowledge it based on your user. You can assign it to someone for follow-up. You can comment on it. So, if you've done some research but you haven't solved it yet, that research would come in handy for anyone else that would be viewing that same anomaly later on and trying to resolve it. Okay. So if you wanted to see all anomalies, then you could just get rid of this filter and it would show you even the ones that have been acknowledged. So keep in mind your alert rules that we talked about earlier that you can configure up here under site group configuration. Alert rules allow you to modify, basically the acknowledgement status, for example, of a new anomaly. So you could automatically acknowledge it, and then it wouldn't show up in this list. But that doesn't mean it's not in the system. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, under advisories, advisories basically are relevant impact due to things like field notices, end of life, end of sale for hardware and software, p-cert notices, which are security notices at a node level, and compliance, and so on and so forth. So this is another area that you're probably going to spend a lot of time inside the UI managing your existing network. If you can keep the number of anomalies and advisories at a minimum, then you're doing proactive work to ensure the health of the network that you're managing. Now here under compliance, right? So we talked about configuring compliance rules before. So this screen basically enables you to track your continuous compliance with security policies and compliance checks that you've configured. think of this as a great screen to visit when you are having some kind of system audit, right? And they want to understand, whether your configuration is compliant with certain rules, or like we talked about, your communication is compliant with certain established requirements. Can these two EPGs talk to each other? Can they not talk to each other, based on regulations and requirements? So that's what the compliance screen is for. Here under troubleshoot, you've got this delta analysis functionality. And a delta analysis basically enables you to analyze the difference in policy, runtime state, and health of the network between two snapshots. So I mentioned every time we collect data, we create a snapshot. So if you want to see what the difference is between like today and yesterday, or between now and 3 hours ago, then that's what you would use a delta analysis for. It compares two snapshots to tell you what has changed. Log collector is where you would go if you want to collect and upload logs for devices in your network straight to Cisco Intersight Cloud. So this is essentially connected TAC, and it enables TAC to trigger on-demand collection of logs for user devices that are a part of your site and pull those logs from Cisco Intersight Cloud. So this basically speeds up the troubleshooting process when you're updating, or when you have a case open that you're trying to troubleshoot on your network. Browse has a whole bunch of different things that you can check out. So here I think is what I was thinking of earlier when I was looking at the dashboard. If you want to understand resource utilization on your ACI fabric, then you can see how many bridge domains, what percentage utilization. We've got very low utilization here. How many bridge domains have we created out of a total capacity? For each of our nodes, what's our TCAM utilization on our leaf switches? Is the switch healthy overall? And so on and so forth. I thought there was CPU. Here we see a bit of network usage or port usage. I thought that there was data in here about CPU and RAM, but that must be located somewhere else. Might be under environmental. So you've got environmental data, flow data. Here we go. So memory, temperature, CPU, power supply, fan utilization, storage, etc. So environmental gives you kind of a good quick overview on a per node basis of the status of each node and whether it needs attention, right? Whether it's healthy or not healthy. So anyway, take a look at the user guide. It'll walk you through the types of information you can find in each of these screens: flow information, endpoint information, applications, interface level statistics, protocol, neighbor relationships, different events happening, all the virtual machines basically that you're managing in your vCenter environment, and so on. Now under change management, we've got two last kind of functionalities we want to talk about in this video. The first one is firmware update analysis. So one of the things that we have to do in maintaining any kind of network is make sure that our firmware stays up to date, and that's both for critical bug fixes, security flaws, as well as newer features that have been released since your older version. So firmware update analysis helps you do that, and basically suggests an upgrade path to a recommended software version and determines any potential impacts of the upgrade. So there's basically a pre-upgrade and a post-upgrade validation checks that occur when you use this feature. And then finally, pre-change analysis. So this is about the software or firmware that's running on the devices, and this is about the configuration that's running on the devices. So this feature allows you to basically propose configuration changes and analyze that against an existing base snapshot in a site to verify if the changes that you're proposing are going to generate the desired results, and to make sure that it's not going to create any new problems. So, there's a pre-change analysis that allows you to model your intended changes and make sure you're going to get the results that you want. So all of this goes into good operational practice of your network. And then finally, I guess the last thing I would mention is that up here under integrations, There's integrations with App Dynamics, which basically pulls data from App Dynamics controller into Nexus Dashboard Insights. There's a DNS integration for Nexus Dashboard Insights. There's a beta integration with Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. So this would basically handle assurance analysis for NDO. And there's also a beta integration for vCenter, which would provide data for VMs and hosts that was pulled from vCenter into Nexus Dashboard Insights. So yeah, hopefully this was a valuable and quick introduction to the Nexus Dashboard Insights user interface. Thanks for watching.